can you logically order an argumentative essay? In this lesson, you will learn to logically order an essay by creating an outline. So here's our prompt. After reading W.B. Du Bois' work, The Souls of Black Folk of Our Spiritual Strivings, write an essay in which you support or refute the author's central claim that African Americans only need freedom, political power, and education to gain their rightful place in American society. Use sufficient evidence from the text to support your discussion. So here's our writing process. First, we need to read closely and analyze. Then we generate and plan. Then we're going to draft and revise. And finally, we edit and publish. In this lesson, we're working on the second step, generate and plan. So an essay that's logically ordered begins with an outline. This helps the essay make sense and flow from one section to the other. It also helps writers remember to include all parts of an essay. A common mistake some writers make is just to immediately begin on a rough draft, but this makes it more likely something will be left out. Now, all essays typically follow the same structure, just like humans have the same skeleton, even though they may look very different on the outside. So in this lesson, we're going to fill in a skeletal outline with claims and counterclaims, refutation, evidence, and reasoning. Then we're going to write a draft that follows the outline. Finally, we're going to ask, does my essay follow my outline? So we know that every outline is going to have an introduction, which has a hook, an author's name and the text title, has a statement of claim, and then it has an introduction to the claim. That's the second paragraph. And that paragraph is going to have evidence. It's going to have reasoning. In the third paragraph, we're going to introduce the counterclaim, which will then again have evidence and have reasoning. And then in the fourth paragraph, we're going to refute the counterclaim. And that just means to object to it. So then we're going to have evidence and reasoning. And in the fifth paragraph, we're going to write our conclusion. Now I just want to jot down what I plan to do for each of these points. And if I can't think of something right at the beginning, I can always skip it and come back to it. And I try hard to put on my crafting hat, put aside the editing hat, because this is where self-editing will cause writer's block. You can always fix it later. Just get something down first. Okay? So I'm going to have an introduction, but right away, okay, I'm having trouble here. So I'm going to come back to it. So I'll just put these X's to hold its place. Then I'm going to say Du Bois and the Souls of Black Folk are the author and the title. Then I know that my claim is that Du Bois does not solve the problems he outlines, racism, hate, and slavery. Then I'm going to introduce my claim. I'm going to say Du Bois' ideals don't fix racism and hatred. I'm like, where in the text does Du Bois talk about racism and hatred? So that's where I could get my evidence. I'm like, oh, first he talked about the veil, remember? And problems with racism and slavery. I say, like, why does this evidence prove my point? Okay? Why does the veil prove that racism and hatred are important? Du Bois says these problems are important. I'm just going to put it out there like that. Oh, then I'm like, you know what? I can define African Americans. How does he define them? Because the whole first chapter, the struggle of our spiritual strivings, is talking about what it means to be African American. So I think that would be a good hook, an introduction. So in the writing process, I think I'm ready to draft and revise. So I'm an introduction, define African Americans, Du Bois and the Souls of Black Folk. Du Bois does not solve the problems he outlines. Then I introduce my claim. This is my evidence. This is why it's important, the reasoning. And then I just want to show you what I've got for the rest of the outlines. So I talked about African Americans only need freedom, the right to vote, and education. And I say wanted freedom because the 14th Amendment, they wanted book learning, that's my evidence. My reasoning is that it explains how Du Bois says this will help. Now I have to refute that, right? What am I going to say against the counterclaim? Well, I'm going to repeat myself. The Du Bois solutions don't fix these problems. And that he makes concessions at the end, that's my evidence. And that these concessions, he's like admitting that he isn't fixing these problems, that these problems will still exist. And then finally, in my conclusion, I want to talk about how African Americans deserve solutions to their problems. So that's the full outline that I'm really going to use to write my rough draft. And remember, we're just drafting, so we can always revise. So in this lesson, we filled in a skeletal outline for an argumentative paper. We wrote a draft that follows the outline. And then we asked, does my essay follow the outline? In this lesson, you have learned to logically order an essay by creating an outline.